We had to fight for 5.5 years to survive.
Grant perfect peace to the souls of all our brethren, men, women, and children who were slaughtered, suffocated, and burned to ashes.
In January of 1933, Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany.
Hitler was a person who knew how to talk and how to mesmerize and people to make it possible for them to follow him. And he also invented or reinvented that the program, "The Jews are our misfortune." The German people were in very difficult straits. And we know from history, through the thousands of history, the 1,000 years of history that we have gone through, that when the times are bad, then you look for scapegoats. His scapegoats were the Jews.
As we were not very rich, but in our home we had a lot of love and a lot of pride to be a Jew.
The discrimination against the Jews started by in the school as kids, by not being treated equal with the Gentile kids, by the teachers not devoting too much effort to explain things to a Jewish kid, by calling Jewish kids by names, by telling the Jewish kids that Hitler will get you.
You see, you had suddenly become subject to new laws. The Weimar Constitution was declared null and void when Hitler took power in 1933, and when he increased his power in 34, 35. In 35, the infamous racial laws became law, where the Jew was declared subhuman, and the Jew was not permitted to be a doctor or a lawyer or even to have a business. And it became impossible soon for the Jewish community to exist.
In 1939, Adolf Hitler invaded Poland to establish new territories for the German people. This was the start of World War II, and Hitler saw the opportunity to rid his world of the Jewish people.
And a little bit later, the Germans marched in. I can feel it. I can hear the footsteps. I can still hear the marching of them marching. And we were locked up in our houses. They were burning our synagogue. I can see the flames in front of me.
Then about a week, maybe 10 days after the Germans came in, one day a truck pulled up to our house with a German officer or a captain, and they start loading up everything that they could find that was not nailed down, so to speak, and loaded on the truck. And as they were leaving, or they took everything, the guy noticed on my mother's finger a wedding band. and he started pulling her because he's been on it for years, and she was crying. And I kind of jumped in between, tried to push the guy away, and he smacked me in the face. My face blew up. Order came out. Everybody had to wear the armbands with the Star of David. Many people, like one time my mother and my cousin got caught not wearing the armband, because the reason you didn't want to wear it because anybody can throw rocks at you or hit you, and who's going to protect you? Nobody was out to protect a Jew. So it was a free-for-all against a Jew. So people, they went to an area where they might have been afraid to walk with the armband, they would take it off. Well, the police did catch my mother and my cousin not having it. My mother, they beat with a ball, rubber ball, but inside was a piece of steel. Her arms were beaten up, were all swollen. My cousin, which was about 17 years old, they made her clean an outhouse with her hands.
We had to go to forced labor every day. They took out some of the men, and some of them never came back because they beat them to death or they killed them for no reason at all. One incident was my father didn't show up one day to work, and 2 policemen came and they took him and they kept him there for several days. And they tortured him and they begged him to be killed. And they said, no, we'll send you back so the others will know what it is if you don't abide by our laws. We moved from our house to these 2 ghettos, to these two streets. And they put a fence around it, and from then on we were watched every day. And the young people had to go to work every day, and they worked in various places. And so they took 2 streets, and they divided it in Ghetto A and Ghetto B. In Ghetto A, they put in the people that were capable of work and the professionals. And Ghetto B, they put in non-working class. And we belong to group to Ghetto B.
And after about 2-3 weeks, the SS came in the ghetto, and there was an Obersturmbannführer. He introduced himself as Krause. My name is Krause, and I'm in command here, and you all obey my orders. Anybody who don't obey, or we're going to be shot on the spot.
People were starving on the streets, laying swelled up, begging for a piece of bread, and just dying from exhaustion. They were dying in the hundreds. You could go out on the street and see people laying dead or half dead.
Every day?
And nobody could help him. Nobody could give him any food because they didn't have.
Was it like that every day, or?
Well, every day we're dying on the street, that's for sure.
They told Ghetto B that they were taking them to a different ghetto. And they told us to be ready in the morning because they were evacuating the ghetto. In the meantime, while we were the 3 months when we were in the ghetto, my father built a hideout between the walls. And when they told us that we were going to be liquidated, they were going to take us to the train station. My father put everybody in between the walls, all 9 of us. It was just a room for a person to stand in. We were just between the walls. And we stayed there for about 2 to 3 days. And then when we heard it was quiet, each time a few of us went out in the night, and we went into Ghetto A. And this is how we survived. Our family was the only one that survived the Ghetto B, the vacation of Ghetto B.
So my brother, which was 3 years younger, David, and my mother and this young lady went to one place. We went to the Samchuk family. My dad went to another place, about approximately half a mile from the place where we were hiding. This is the barn where we were hiding. So we were kind of blocked off. Like, you know, you had to have a place to go up to the attic, but you would be going up to the attic, and there would be a stack of hay. So nobody could see us if you went up from one side out to the attic, the regular side. But there was a special opening from the barn that that's how we were getting our food. Our space in that area was about the size of a queen-size bed. Myself and my brother were sleeping one way, and the teacher and the young lady were sleeping the other way. The only thing that I could do is lay down or sit up. My younger brother, he could go right in the middle, kind of near the chimney, and he could stand up there. But he was the only one that could stand up. I realized we couldn't speak a loud word. Part of the worry in the beginning was, will I ever be able to speak a loud word again? Because all we could do is whisper, and we could only whisper in certain times. We were so afraid. I mean, it's so hard to explain. I mean, my mother, when we went into hiding, was pregnant. That's a very tough story for me to tell, because I haven't told the story. I've told about my story, but haven't told this story. A decision had to be made. What to do with the baby. We couldn't have, you know, since we couldn't speak loud words, we couldn't have anybody crying. How do we know a baby is not going to cry? How can you tell a baby not to cry? So a decision was made. You had to kill the baby. When the baby was born, my mother couldn't scream of the pain. Because if she would have screamed, we would have been dead. We were told, me and my brother were told not to look, you know, to turn around, look the other way. While Claire performed the miracle of giving birth and killing at the same time. So heaven was a girl. My mother always wanted a girl. In 1942, after the Wannsee Conference, the Nazis became more deliberate in their effort to isolate, persecute, and murder the Jews. The final solution.
So we got to the train station, and they put us in the cattle wagon. And we were already inside. When I looked out the window just to see my father is standing outside, holding in his hand a package and trying to come up to the train. And I ran to the door. I thought, well, let me give him a last hug. And of course, they wouldn't let me get off the train. and he couldn't come up. So he stayed there crying, and we were standing at the window and couldn't do nothing. And until he saw the train started to move. So that was the last time I have seen my father.
They put us in cattle trains, wagons. Luckily, they were sort of not tightly built, so we had enough air. But they put us so tight together that all of us had to stand up. Nobody could sit down. It was wall-to-wall people. And I think we were going about 4 days until destination was Auschwitz. Now, in these 4 days, maybe a fourth of the people died while standing there because it was impossible. The stench and the hunger and you know, older people couldn't take it, so they wouldn't even fall because the people held them together. They couldn't even fall while dying. We came to Auschwitz, and all of a sudden, all the doors open, and all you heard was barking dogs, shouting and screaming, "Juden out, Juden out." It means Jews out of the wagons. And then they told us the women separate, the women and the children separate, the men separate in a different part. And 4 Gestapos came, and whoever caught their eye, they grabbed you for the shoulder, they put you aside. And in our transport, it must have been about 1,500 people, and 100 they took out aside. 100 girls, they took out, young girls. And they took us, we had to walk in 5 rows in 5. They took us away, and the others, they pushed in a different corner. Us, they took inside of the concentration camp, and we had to completely disrobe, and everything was working just like clockwise. One girl came and she shaved us everywhere. Another girl came and she tattooed a number on our arms. And then they took us into a shower, like to clean us. From what, I don't know. And then they told us to wait in sub-zero temperature outside, naked. We were standing and like monkeys, without hair, without anything. I didn't see myself, but I saw others, so I knew how I looked. Then they gave us the striped clothing, a dress and clogs, and like a little jacket, a long jacket with blue and grayish stripes. And they led us to a barrack. While we were going, we went into mud this high. We lost our shoes. And when they brought us into the barracks, I couldn't believe my own eyes what I saw. Girls sitting, screaming and crying, and I thought I was in a different world. I didn't believe that anything exists like this.
I was a human there. I was called by a number. I didn't have a name. You had to remember your number to answer.
And every morning we would wake up, there would half of us be dead there. And every morning we had to take out piles of bodies, live in the front of the barracks, and then a truck would come and pick them up for burning. And beating was going on every day for every little thing. If you didn't stand straight in the lines, or if you would move a little bit, or you wanted to scratch, or just move, you were hit in the face. I was hit many times myself.
If you reported you were sick or anything like this, that means you're going to get shot. There was no medical. There was not even a bandage in this camp. And every day they counted the people. You had to stand outside, cold, hot, whatever it was. They counted you. Every day was counting, irregardless, in every camp. They counted, and I was missing because I was so sick. I didn't care anymore, and I didn't go out. So they searched. They found out that I was the one who was missing. They searched for me, and they found me. They brought me out, and there I really got beaten up.
You were beaten up by whom?
Was beaten up by the SS then. They put me over a bench, and they were standing on my feet in the back, and they put my hands down, they tied them underneath the bench, and they gave me about 25 over my naked rear. And my skin broke open, and it was bleeding, and I was in pretty bad shape.
And we had 4 guards who took us to work every day and who watched us. And the guards, they didn't have anything to amuse themselves during the day. So they used to bring empty beer bottles, what they drink nights before and their friends drink. And they used to tie the beer bottles with rubber bands to our heads. And while we were digging in the ground and shoving it, they shoot off the bottles. And there were many, many times that they hit your head and killed you. And I experienced that many times. And the feeling what you have when you hear something pop, especially when you already experienced many of them killed. Like for the first splits, for the few split seconds, you are like frozen. You actually don't know if you're alive or dead.
If there were too many survivors in the concentration camp, for instance, because if it was too many, they would make selections. You know, they would tell us to disrobe completely, and there would sit one of the SS. One was Hess, and one was I don't remember the other names. They would have chairs like this, sit there, 3 of them, and we were running, sort of running in front of them on display, and he had a little stick in his hand and said, "This one, this one, this one," and they would take him out and gas them.
And I found out that my second oldest brother, I was in the camp with my oldest brother and my father. My second oldest brother was in Auschwitz. His job was to guide the people to the gas chamber. When he recognized my father as being one of them, he included himself. And I wish he wouldn't ask that.
To say a few words, to let others know that Jews weren't sitting on their hands. Some of us fought and fought dearly and spilled our blood and laid our life while we were destroying the Nazi beast. We used to, that was practically every second week, we used to tear up telephone lines. We used to tear up railroad track, the track itself. Just tear it up.
In the meantime, there was another incident. Some girls that worked in ammunition factories would bring in ammunition. There were rumors that they were going to blow up the crematorium. I didn't know who it was. And when it happened, and then they arrested 3 girls. One of them was from my husband's town, which I knew who it was. And all 3 girls would bring in every day into the camp pieces of ammunition, and they would somebody would pick it up. They had connection already. Everything was arranged, and they picked it up. And when they had enough explosive, they blew up the crematorium.
So who actually blew them up?
men from the men's camp, not the girls. The girls only provided. Now those girls were, after they tortured them and they didn't tell anything, they were brought, they made 3 gallows, and I mean the SS made 3 gallows, and they brought us from work, all of us, they marched us back, and we had to stand and watch. They brought out the girls, and they hung all 3 of them in front of us, and we had to look straight, and they were moving around. The SS were moving around and watching us. If we turned away the head, they would hit us. And we had to look straight where the girls were hung.
I was beaten quite often because I stick up for the sick ones. Sometimes a Czechoslovakian woman will tell me in the factory that she hid an apple or a piece of cake or a slice of bread for me to take it home. If I can, I smuggled it through to save the people in the sick room. An apple I cut up, oh boy, how many pieces I made out of it. And I fed them so they can live an hour more.
Even though the Nazis were losing the war, they were determined to continue the murdering of the Jewish people quickly and efficiently.
Transports were coming day and night, and they did not, the crematorium could not accommodate so many people. So they dug, also one of the men, we saw them digging the big pits in right in the back of the fence of Auschwitz. And they would gas the people and just throw them into the pits and make a fire, and the fire was as high as maybe 3-4 stories in the open. They were burning them. The smell was terrible. So if anybody, you know, when anybody that lived close by, if they said they didn't know or they didn't smell, then they are lying, because the smell was, we used to go to work for miles away from Auschwitz, and we would smell the flesh burning. And then they cleared the whole camp, thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and they took us, it was called the Death March. They took us out, it was in January of '45, and we marched for miles and miles and miles.
And we were marching day and night without any food. And if you collapsed, if you couldn't walk anymore, they didn't try to revive you, they just shot you. And I seen after the first 7-8 hours, you already started to see people get shot like that. And after, I would say, on the 3rd day, before the 3rd day was over, there was about 700 people left from the 5,000.
A friend of mine that we were very close, and we came to a field at night, and she found out that there was potatoes in this field, so she ran with lots of girls. I couldn't run because my knee was giving up on me. She was running with the other girls for some potatoes, so the SS were shooting into the crowd, and she got a bullet right in her hip and went through the other hip out, and she died in my hands.
All I had on me was just bone and skin. My skin was really separated from the bone. I mean, it was just hanging loose. I mean, if you had, like, actually, you could almost see through, you could see my bones in the skin, because there was hardly any meat left on me. I was like a skeleton.
So you only survived on soup and bread. You had to swim to find a potato once in a while. By the time 5 years went by, you could go in one shoe with 2 feet. We had to fight for 5.5 years to survive.
Those of us who did survive lost many loved ones.
This is my dad. He died at 32. He was killed, I should say. This is my sister, Simka Tabachkiewicz. or she might have been 15, almost something like that. But a couple months later, or 3 months later, they sent her to Auschwitz. My stepmother and my brother were gone already then. That's my brother. He was around 10, 11. Josek. Sorry. He was sent with my stepmother. He was 11 years old, probably. And they sent him. He died with her, but my sister died of typhus. People who survived told me they were with her. They were with her in the same room. She passed away. They couldn't save her, she could. Typhus. And the next day she was, they took her to the crematorium. And she died like the rest of them.
This is my father. His name was Lej Pomeranec. This is my mother. Her name was Sora Fagel Pomeranec, and she was born in 1900. They both perished in 42 at a place called Bronna Gura.
My grandmother, we were told, the German threw her into a house and burned the house with her inside. I mean, there was nobody from our family that survived. They all died through concentration camps or were just outright killed. All my relatives, all my uncles, cousins, aunts, etc. They're all killed. I have a difficult time, even though I lived through it, to believing, how did I make it? I mean, here I was, you know, I remember talking to my little brother, and we used to say, do you think sometime when we have children, if we tell them the story, will people ever believe us? And he said, no. Because it's so difficult. I lived through it. And the pain.
And yet I live with this every day. It's impossible to forget. And we came here and we started anew here, and it wasn't easy. It was very hard. But we managed because after all we were free.
Hatred doesn't leave nobody nothing.
I don't want other children to go through what I had to go through. And I think each one of us can make a difference. One person can make a difference. When we see hate, bigotry, racism, anti-Semitism, we can't let it happen. We have to stop in and stop whoever is doing it.
It can happen again. Because if they start with one race, they don't finish with the one. They keep on doing it again and again and again with others.
Tell them what happened. So no child, no human being should ever, ever have to go through what I did.
And hatred has no room in our hearts or in our home.
God should forbid. It should never happen again. I hope.
ויפות עלייה נשמותיהם. בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם, לכן בל ורחמים, יסתירם מסתר כנפיו לעולמים. ביצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. ארץ אל תכסי דמם, ואנוכה ושלום על משכבם, ונאמר